and welcome to Finance Conversation. This is the 15th episode of the Merging Life and Money Show, and I am super excited to be here with you. For those of you who do not know me, I am your host, Marie-Jo César. I help frustrated professional women acquire and apply the relevant financial skills and knowledge they need to take control of their money from the inside out, manage their finances, and understand that they can live their best life with the money they have. Thank you for joining in today. If you are watching the replay, make sure to type #replay in the chat and leave me some comments and questions. Welcome, welcome, and welcome. I come to you live every Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to share valuable information about how to achieve financial wellness and live your life with means and meaning. Today's show is the second episode of a new series titled The Scoop on Women and Money. I will be talking about the pay gap. When I was looking at topics for this series, the pay gap was one of them, and I did not realize how controversial and political the topic was until I started to research it. I promise I will not engage in any controversy, and I will address this topic in a logical way. However, I would be remiss if I did not mention that this week, Tuesday, the Senate Republicans blocked legislation aimed at providing equal pay for working women in America. The bill would have helped strengthen protections for women and eliminate the gender pay gap. The bill addressed specifics of wage discrimination on the basis of gender. Also, it would have increased transparency in pay rates and salaries, enabling women to learn if they are earning less than men in similar jobs, and would have prohibited employers from retaliating against workers who compare salaries and bar them from inquiring about prospective employees' salaries history during the hiring process. Here you have it. So grab a pen and a notebook, as you might want to take some notes to discuss further with family members, friends, colleagues, because it is about sharing value that could benefit others. If you have any comments or questions, make sure to put them in the chat. And if you want to talk to me directly, I will share my contact information later in the show. As you know, the main objective of the Merging Life and Money Show is to empower as many women as possible with what I know about money and finance. Today, I will talk about the pay gap as it relates to gender and race. I will focus on 3 points. What is the gender wage gap and how it affects women of different demographics? Why are women earning less than men, and the impact of the gender wage gap? So, what is the gender wage or pay gap? The gender pay gap, gender is a really hard word for me to say for some reason. The gender pay gap refers to the difference in wages and salaries between men and women. Experts have calculated this gap in a multitude of ways, but the varying calculation points to a consensus that women consistently earn less than men, and the gap is wider for most women of color. Currently, women make about 82.7% of what men make, and this translates to 83 cents to the dollar. So the typical woman is paid 83 cents for every dollar that the typical man is paid. In addition, there are also racial disparities. White women and Asian American women, on average, make more than Hispanic, Black, or Native American women. And this calculation is the ratio of median annual earnings for women working full-time year-round to those of their male counterpart. Pay and wages are not the only inequalities, okay? The type of jobs women do also fit that category. So according to researcher of Stanford University, only about 2% of executives at major corporations are women. And in the largest 1,000 companies in the US, ranked by revenue, there aren't any women executives at all. I mentioned that women make roughly 82.7% of what men make. In dollar terms, this means women brings home $3.27 less per hour than men. Therefore, the median hourly wage is 17.67 cents for women and 18.94 cents for men. I will also add that the gap has narrowed since the 1960s, due largely to women's progress in education and workforce participation, and to men's wage rising at a slower rate. So, having said that, a lot more must be done. So why are women earning less than men? Based on the topic, based on the research that I was researching the topic, I found that there were really three main issues causing the gender gap, and they are segregation by occupation, motherhood penalty, and direct gender and race discrimination and bias. So let's look at occupational segregation. Early in boys and girls' education experiences, there are gender expectations regarding what boys and girls are good to or could or should be focusing on. These different expectations, as well as external pressure to conform to stereotypes about gender roles, follow women and men into classes, into their extracurricular activities, their college major, and their career directions. In a recent study conducted by the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, the US civilian workforce included 160 million full and part-time employed workers. Of these, 53% were men and 47% were women. But women and men tend to work in a different kind of job, right? So women are mainly represented in education, office and administrative support, and healthcare occupation, while men are mainly represented in construction, maintenance and repair, and production and transportation occupations. So segregation by occupation is a major factor behind the pay gap. Even though a pay gap exists within nearly every occupational field, jobs traditionally associated with men tend to pay better than traditionally female-dominated jobs that require the same level of skills. So occupational gender segregation has decreased over the last 40 years, largely due to women moving into formerly male-dominated jobs. Occupational segregation also continues to affect some women more than others. Working in traditionally male fields likely improve wages for individual women, but it is unlikely to eliminate the pay gap. Women in such male-dominated jobs as computer programming still face a pay gap compared with men in the field, even though women in such jobs may be paid higher salaries than women in traditional female fields. And moving into a higher paying field can have diminishing return for women over time, believe it or not. A study of 50 years of US workforce data concluded that when an influx of women enters a previously male-dominated profession, average wages for the occupation as a whole actually decrease, even for men in the field. Really, I don't think that women are drawn to low-paying fields because they desire low pay, okay? I believe that the work that women do is valued less than work done by men because that work is done by women. Lastly, what does the wage gap mean for American women? On average, women employed full-time in the United States lose a combined total of more than $956 billion with a B every year due to the wage gap. These lost wages mean women and their family have less money to support themselves, save and invest for the future, and spend on goods and services. Women, their families, businesses, and the economy suffer as a result. Now, the second one is the motherhood penalty. Becoming a parent produces very different professional outcomes for women and men. Mothers working full-time are paid only 71% of what fathers make. Taking time away from the workforce or cutting back hours, both more common scenarios for mothers and fathers, hurts her earnings. Until the pandemic, actually, many employers and industry prioritize long, continuous traditional work hours rather than flexible schedules, a preference that tended to put women with children at a disadvantage. So many working mothers also encounter a motherhood penalty, which extend beyond their actual time out of the workforce. Experimental studies have documented that employees are less likely to hire mothers, including mothers who never left the workforce, than they are to hire women without children. And when employers do make an offer to a mother, they offer her a lower salary than they offer to other women. So the magnitude of the penalty for mothers in the workforce has remained steady for the past few decades and even increased slightly for some mothers after accounting for education and work experience. Fathers, in contrast, do not suffer a penalty compared with other working men. Many fathers actually receive a higher wage after having a child, known as the fatherhood bonus. The very different experiences of women and men who become parents are the result of gender norms and expectation, institutional system built around a worker who is not a primary caretaker, and a lack of systemic support for new parents in the United States. Nearly every other country in the world mandate access to paid leave for new mothers. And most developed countries provide similar leave for new fathers. In the United States, there is no national paid parental leave right or system. And only 15% of workers receive paid parental leave from their employers, according to 2017 US Bureau of Labor Statistics. As a result, most new parents must take shorter leaves than they would prefer or return to work as soon as possible after childbirth to avoid lost wages. Another factor making it difficult for women to participate fully in the American workforce is the expectation they will continue to be primary caretakers. This gets further compounded by limited availability and high price of childcare. Especially care for young infants and toddlers. Okay, the average price of childcare in the United States is $8,800 per child per year. And the average for infant in childcare center setting is $11,100. So costs are much higher in cities and states with higher cost of living, okay, according to a study conducted by Childcare Aware of America in 2017. So paying for childcare for one or more children may be impractical or even impossible for parents with low income, right? Well, mainly women. So as a result, mothers who might otherwise remain in the workforce may lose years of earnings and salary history as they care for their children. The last but not least issue causing the gender gap is direct gender and race discrimination and bias. Direct discrimination and bias against women in the workplace are corporate in the pay gap. Okay, so each year, the EEOC, which is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, receives thousands of sex, race, and other pay discrimination complaints, and many of these, and of course, many of these are decided or resolved in favor of the person who filed the charge, according to 2018 data. In part, due to persistent sex discrimination, women are also less likely than men to reach the highest paying leadership and executive positions. Statistics show that pre-pandemic, women held very low percentages of private sector executive positions, and women of color were particularly unlikely to hold such position. As noted previously, women of different racial and ethnic groups in the United States have widely varying gap in their earnings when compared to white men. This statistic reflects cumulative disadvantages resulting from different circumstances and opportunity, including direct and structural racial biases, the effect of gender bias, and the intersectional effect of belonging to groups that experience unique stereotypes and bias. For instance, while all women are underrepresented in executive positions relative to their labor force participation, Black women are the most underrepresented of any group. The intersectional impact of race and gender biases contributes to the overall gender pay gap, as women of color experience pay outcomes that are worse than would be predicted by additive effect of race and gender separately. In other words, when closely examining the impact of race and gender, as well as other factors, on the pay of Black men, Black women, white men, and white women, it is clear that Black women experience a large gap that cannot be attributed to other observable characteristics, such as occupation and education, or by race or gender separately. Moreover, Black women's education and other labor force characteristics are now such that they would be expected to be paid more than Black men if gender bias were not a factor. Yet, they are still paid less. So, women of different racial and ethnic background all have different experiences of discrimination, but biases based on race, gender, and the intersection of race and gender all contribute measurably to the overall gap. The good news is that while the challenges of 2020 have led some women to leave the workforce due to the pandemic, others rose to the top level of business, according to a new report from WB Collaborative, which is Women Business Collaborative. Women made gains in leadership roles in all sectors, but private industry truly stepped up in the last year. This was more than simple platitude and commitment statement, but included accelerating the pace of appointments of women to the highest levels, showing results and being more flexible with its workforce during the pandemic. So companies such as UPS, Clorox, Citigroup, CVS, and Dick's Sporting Goods, I believe, name women CEOs, pushing women into 7.8% of the top corporate leadership. Additionally, women of color joined boards at record levels, ensuring gains are widely shared. NASDAQ, the global technology company serving the capital markets and other industry, put forth its commitment requiring its 3,000 plus companies listed to improve boardroom diversity by appointing at least one woman and at least one minority or LGBTQ plus person. So, progress in the making, okay? So now let's look at the third point, which is the impact of gender wage gap. There are many reasons for the financial challenges women face in the workplace. One of the main reasons is that women tend to be evaluated on their past education and experience, while men tend to be evaluated on their potential. So men are often seen to have more of the innate qualities of leadership, competence, and as a result, women tend to obtain more education and experience than men in the same job in order to land the same position. Consequently, women make up the majority of college students and are left burdened by more debt in order to land the same position, which is not always a guarantee. So while the impact of the gender pay gap is difficult to quantify, it is generally true that the lower the income a woman has, the less of a nest egg she's likely to have in retirement. So in addition to having less money saved for retirement, women also carry nearly 2/3 of the nation's student loan debt. Also, employers' use of women's prior salary history to set their wages in new jobs means that wage discrimination carries forward from job to job, compounding over time. And because women typically are paid less than men during working years, women receive less income than men do from Social Security, pension, and other sources when they retire, right? And other benefits such as disability or life insurance are also smaller for women because these benefits usually are based on earnings, right? So other reasons that affect the pay gap are sexual orientation and gender identity. A study of the pay received by gay men, lesbians, and bisexual men and women found that all three groups have labor market outcomes that diverge from heterosexual workers. So gay men are paid less than straight men, okay? While lesbians are paid more than straight women. But both differences are attributed primarily to differences in family structure. Gay men do not receive the fatherhood bonus, right? So that many men receive. While lesbians are more likely than straight women to avoid the motherhood penalty due to a lower likelihood of having children. So When analyzing the gender pay gap, it's also important to include people who do not identify with the gender they had at birth. Like transgender people frequently experience harassment and discrimination in the workplace because of their gender identity, as well as discrimination and obstacle in other domains that further harm their economic security. In the final analysis, the gender pay gap is consistent across sexual orientation. Regardless of sexual orientation, women tend to have lower earnings than men. Therefore, eliminating the gender pay gap would lower poverty rates for couples that include at least one woman. So, how do we fix the gender wage gap? Is it even fixable? Because the gender pay gap has no one singular cause, there isn't a quick fix when it comes to reducing the pay disparity between men and women. Instead, there are a variety of different strategies that could be implemented at company, state, and national levels in order to narrow the gap. In many cases, these strategies may also result in more equitable working conditions and fair, transparent pay structures for all workers, regardless of gender. I identified a few of them while doing my little bit of research for the topic today. Raising the minimum wage and fixing pay disparities would be one. Increasing pay transparency. Implementing stronger protection for workers' rights to unionize and bargain collectively. Implementing fair scheduling practices. Expanding paid family and medical leave. Increase access to childcare. Stopping basing employee pay on salary history. And improving work-life synergies. So guys, listeners, followers, eliminating the wage gap would provide much needed income to women whose wages sustain their households. I'm going to wind down here. Still a lot to be said, and do a quick recap. Today I talked about what is gender wage gap. I talked about why are women earning less than men. And I also talk about the impact of the gender wage gap and how it might be fixed. Okay. So before I forget, let me share my contact information. You can reach me by sending me an email at mj@marijocesar.com or by sending me a DM via Messenger. And I am going to leave you with these last thoughts. The pay gap affects women from all backgrounds, at all ages, and at all levels of educational achievement. It has lifelong financial effects. It follows women throughout their time in the workforce and even after they leave the workforce. So closing the gender pay gap would have a large impact on women, their families, and the economy. Eliminating the gender pay gap by increasing women's pay to match that of women of the same age and education level would cut the poverty rate for all working women in half, regardless of their family structure. As you know, I like to end the show with a quote, and today's quote is from Barack Obama, and it reads, "Women are paid 77 cents on the dollar for doing the same work as men. It is not a myth. It is math, M-A-T-H. For more information about how to achieve financial wellness from the inside out and live a purposeful life with the money you have, join me next week, Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time. I will be discussing, I don't know yet, but something interesting. So thank you for being here today on the Merging Life and Money Show. I am your host, Marie-Jo César. I will be back again next week. Until then, continue merging life and money. Bye for now.